Today we're talking about the Hitman franchise. This is a series of games that started all the way in 2000 and is still ongoing to this day. There are 8 games in this franchise, 9 if you count a mobile one, but I'm going to ignore that one. But without further ado, I decided to give you guys my ranking from worst to best. Coming in last place is a game that I don't physically own, and that's Hitman Absolution. I did have the game back in the day on PS3, but now I just have a digital copy that came with Hitman Blood Money, which is the only reason I would even buy the game. So I'll just hold up AC Trilogy for this one. Absolution is what happens when you just don't give a shit anymore. Basically, the game takes away the free roam aspect of Hitman. Basically, Hitman, you get into these levels, and it's essentially a free roam environment where you can take out targets however you please and go around the environment. Absolution completely screwed that up, and in this game, you essentially play in a linear sort of fashion with only a couple levels that actually branch out. There is some damn good voice acting in Absolution, as well as some really cool actors that they got to do the voice acting, such as Keith Carradine, Powers Booth, Ian McShane, and hell, even Tracy Lord shows up for some reason. All in all, Hitman Absolution is an okay third-person action shooter, but a terrible Hitman game. Getting rid of the first-person mode, getting rid of all the other features in the previous games, it just doesn't really work. It's a pretty game with some good voice acting, but that's about it, and my least favorite of the franchise. Up next, we have the OG Hitman, codename 47. I actually rather do like this one a lot, and this is actually the most recent one that I played. I wanted to play this game for years, but I just never got around to it. And funnily enough, it's pretty much the only game never released on consoles in the whole series. It's entertaining, it's fun, but the graphics are kind of wonky. The controls leave something to be desired, and it's basically a rough version of Hitman. I didn't expect the world of this one because it is the first game, but all in all, I do enjoy Hitman Codename 47. I found this to be an enjoyable game, and while it is dated, I still do enjoy the first Hitman game very much, and I do recommend it. It's a little wonky, but if you're a fan of Hitman, you'll have a good time. In 6th place, we have Hitman 2, Silent Assassin. If you can, I actually do recommend the GameCube version of the game, which is sadly the only one that the GameCube ever got, which is such a damn shame because the GameCube controller is one of my favorites, and I would have loved to play Contract and Blood Money on this bad boy. This game sees 47, in an attempt to save one of his friends, go on another adventure where he has to kill a lot of people in order to pay for the sins of his past while also rescuing people. It's a pretty damn good game with some really great gameplay, and it's basically the polished up version of Codename 47. This is everything Codename 47 should have been. Codename 47 is still decent, but this basically takes that and really refines it. And it's kind of hard to go back to the first one after you played too. All in all, very enjoyable, very fun, a little rough around the edges, and not my favorite Hitman game, but a solid sequel. Up next, we have Hitman Contracts. I don't own this game standalone, but it is included here in the HD trilogy, and I really do enjoy Contracts. Contracts is basically the soft remake of Hitman Codename 47. Basically, before they made a third game, they kind of sort of remade the first one. It's not a full-blown remake. I'd say about half the levels here are remakes of the ones from the first game, and the other half is basically new missions altogether. So it is its own thing. If you've played Codename 47, I still recommend playing Contracts, and vice versa. A very enjoyable continuation. It shows 47 nearly on the brink of death after being shot, and reminiscing about hits that he's done throughout the years and what led him to this point. A pretty good story and one of the better ones of the franchise. It's one that I really love, and I think Contracts is actually a bit underrated. Very enjoyable, and one that I highly recommend. Up next, we have Hitman 2015. I actually debated whether or not I should separate the Hitman World of Assassination trilogy, and ultimately I decided to keep them separate, because while it is basically one big game, they are different enough, at least in terms of levels, to kind of have their own flair. The gameplay is pretty much identical, but they all bring something different to the table. The first one, though, has been more or less a revamping of the franchise. After the abomination that was Absolution, they decided to get back on track and more or less give people a more traditional Hitman adventure. There is still stuff missing from this one that was not in Absolution. For instance, first-person mode is not here. You can't customize your weapons like you could in Blood Money and other games. But apart from that, the gameplay is smooth, the action is smooth, the voice acting is great, the graphics are amazing. It's everything you want in a Hitman game, with the exception of a couple of things like first-person mode, and of course weapon customization. A great game with only 6 levels, unfortunately, but still fun, and one that I do recommend. Coming in slightly ahead of that one is Hitman 2, not to be confused with Hitman 2 Silent Assassin. The second in the World of Assassination trilogy sees the hitman continuing on his adventure and killing more mofos. This is a great game and a great continuation, and it really refines that first game. Plus, there's 8 missions in this game as opposed to the 6 on the first game, so they really upped the ante here. The only downside to this game, I would say, is that the cutscenes are more or less still frames. And what happened was the budget was kind of cut between this game and the first game, because the first game sold well, but not quite as well as they would have liked. So in order to cut corners, they decided to keep all the content in the game, which is great, but they took the cinematics and just turned them into still images, which it kind of works for this game. It does look, pretty good. The cutscenes are basically hand-drawn, but I really did miss the cinematics. And it's kind of weird because by the time you get to the third game, the cinematics are back. So it's just kind of a weird, as far as cutscenes go, it's just kind of a weird entry in the trilogy. Still fun, still great, and minus the, stiff cutscenes, an improvement over the first. Coming in at number 2 is Hitman 3. These 3 games really do improve over the originals, and that's kind of why I put them all back to back, and each one is kind of better than the last. The only downside to 3 over 2 is there's only 6 missions again this time, but they're the best ones. There's this great Manor mission, which might be one of my favorite in all of Hitman, the entire series, that is. And it's amazing. You have to go around, it's like an Agatha Christie novel, and find out who killed this person while also trying to finish your own hit, which is actually pretty damn interesting. A very fun and great conclusion to this trilogy. And if we never get another Hitman game, and we might, but if we never do, this is a damn solid ending that kind of wraps everything up in a nice, neat little bow. The best of the new trilogy, Hitman 3, is just great. But it cannot beat Hitman Blood Money. The 4th installment is just perfection, and there's really no way I can put it. While the new games do have slightly smoother gameplay, I will admit, what they lack, though, is the little details, the little fine touches that this game brought that was sadly not seen again since this game. For one, you get money after every mission, and you can use that money to customize and change your weapons. Also, you can also play the game in first person, which I really love. I love walking around in third person, but when I'm ready to shoot somebody, I'm switching to first person every time. A feature that sadly is just missing from the newest games. The graphics, while a little dated by today's standards, are still very smooth and polished. And if you have a PS4 or PS5, I highly recommend getting the 4K version of this game. The graphics are basically the same, but the textures have been improved, and it's very smooth and looks great on modern consoles. The gameplay in this game is amazing. From a wine vineyard all the way to Las Vegas itself, there are amazing levels in this game. Hell, even several levels that take place in Louisiana, which I used to live in Louisiana when I was younger, so it's really cool to see that state represented, including a Mardi Gras parade and a Southern Bayou wedding, which is really cool too. Everything about the game is amazing, and I absolutely love it. It's my favorite game on 360, and my favorite Hitman game as well. You can't go wrong with this one. It's available on PC, PS4, PS3, and the HD Trilogy Collection, and 360. You can't go wrong with Blood Money, and it is the best of the franchise. It is perfection, and the only way they could ever top this, I think, is if they took the overall gameplay from the new games, but added in the first person and customization from this game, and you would have the perfect Hitman game. But until that happens, or if that ever happens, this is the game to play. The new ones are great, but they can never top the 4th entry, Hitman Blood Money. Well, that's my list. All in all, I do think that this is a great series of stealth games with a really cool story about a hitman going around killing bad guys, and it's just entertaining as all hell. IO Interactive, the company that makes the more modern ones, is actually going to make a James Bond game soon, and I'm very much looking forward to that because I really think that after the great work they did with the new trilogy, I'd like to see what they can do with Bond, who partially inspired Hitman. All in all, if you love a good series of games, I actually recommend the Hitman franchise very much. They're all pretty much easy to buy these days, and are relatively cheap. You can't go wrong with Blood Money, and you can't go wrong with the new trilogy. But if you're feeling more nostalgic, the first 3 aren't bad either. The only one that I don't recommend is Absolution. But, one bad game out of 8 games ain't too bad. Peace out.